Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome. Good to see you more and more. I want to...
Добрий день, щоб ви у вас спиною не сиділи, давайте вон там, я думаю, біля Остапа можна.
So it's my honor to present this discussion. My name is TS-LKD, I will moderate, and it's a great honor to present you these studies. Gintare Narkeviciute is a Lithuanian politician, activist, who is extremely strong supporter of Ukraine, well before the Revolution of Dignity, during the Maidan, after the Maidan. She is like key promoter of Ukraine in Lithuania as well as in the EU, including European People's Party. And she was standing in the latest elections to the European Parliament. And I think this is like just initial steps in elections of Gintare for the future. And you know Hanna Hopko, head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, who served professionally for the last 5 years. So basically our topic of discussion is after elections in Ukraine, Lithuania and the EU. What will happen? So we had elections in Ukraine in March and April, finished basically 2 days ago. We had elections in Lithuania of the president of Ukraine. We do not have huge support of Ukraine, Dalia Grybauskaitė, who is not president anymore with a new president. And we had elections of the European Parliament, significant changes, as well as new European Commission which was appointed and elected by the European Parliament. So first of all, I would like to ask you your opinion about, general opinion, how do you see changes in Ukraine, Lithuania and the EU? What will happen next? Let's start from Gintare.
So, доброго дня, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here in Ukraine. I always say that if I would be allowed to choose a second citizenship, that would be Ukraine, because my heart isn't here since many years ago, and I got hooked up with the state, especially during Euromaidan revolution since 2013. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you, especially at these very hot days, literally and politically too, right after the parliamentary elections in Ukraine. We also had 3 elections in Lithuania. It's not only European Parliament, it's a presidential and it's local one as well. So this year was an election year for us and a big challenge as well. I represent the Homeland Union, Lithuanian Christian Democrats, which is the center-right party in Lithuania. So we say that we won the European Parliament elections. We got 3 seats, which is increased from 2. To give you a glance, Lithuania holds only 11 seats in the European Parliament as a state, so 3 seats as a share. It's quite a good number. And I think the best news out of these 3 politicians is that we have people like Andrius Kubilius, who is a key idea author and creator of so-called Marshall's Plan for Ukraine. So I think these are the very cheerful news, because even before he became the member of European Parliament, in his capacity as a former Prime Minister and as the member of the Parliament in Lithuania, he was promoting many ideas and reforms on how to aid and assist Ukraine at this very moment. How we can help from the West for Ukraine to strengthen from the inside. So now, at this moment, we have such people like him, and also another ones like Rasa Yuknevičienė, who is a former defense minister, who is also used to chair the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and was very vocal on the issues when it comes to defense of the territories of Ukraine and of course Georgia and other countries. So those people were basically our major voices when it comes on the most crucial issues for Ukraine. So these are the good news. Nevertheless, Lithuania is not representing the vast majority of the all European Union countries, and I think a very light reflection on the different type of support can be found in the not so late vote when it comes in PACE, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, on returning voting rights to Russian Federation, which I think is a step back. And if we look into the map which countries were supporting this. It was basically South and Western Europe, Baltic states, of course, and Poland and a couple of Nordics voted against this rise. But I think in a way that also reflects on how many of politicians in European countries fully realize the situation when it comes to Russian aggression in the European states such as Ukraine. Nevertheless, just a few days ago, again, as initiative of Andrius Kubilius in European Parliament, we got to vote on the very friendly resolution when it comes on Ukraine and Russia's aggression in Ukraine. So yet again, our voices are being strong, but what Ukraine really needs to continue doing is strengthening, first of all, its diplomatic corps and its representation abroad. I can really greet the latter 4 maybe years. This service was strengthened. Ukraine's representatives were heard more. We had quite good composition of the PACE delegation. To give you an example, before Euromaidan revolution, Ukraine wasn't heard, or heard very not in the way that we would like to see, and we would even used to say among ourselves, you know, like we used to look for solutions, how to increase Ukraine's participation in the issues which should be important for themselves. So sometimes we say that we stand more for Ukraine than some of the Ukraine's representatives. So I think this is the path of the strengthening of the foreign representation that Ukraine should continue doing. How this newly elected government will do that, it's really difficult to say. In our countries, we have this, you know, unwritten tradition in politics that we should give at least 100 days for the newly elected politicians to show what they have and to prove how much they can deliver of the promises that they made during the elections. In particular, I would like to underline promises, because we really see, or me personally, I really saw very little of policies in the programs of the newly elected party of the new president of Ukraine. So, as from our side, we'll really give 100 days, but Ukrainian society is the one who gave the trust to these people, and I think it's always up to you to react if something is going wrong, and to oppose. Of course, this is the very nice regulation of the democracy, which has to be used. Otherwise, we risk to switch towards more of authoritarian or one man or one group rule. So having a strong opposition in this case is also very important. In any country, it's very important. We also had just recently reappointed a new head of the European Commission, Ursula, the former defense minister from Germany. Of course, this is an unprecedented move because, as you may already know, there's always a Spitzenkandidat and long procedure of how we appoint and vote on the head of the President of the European Commission. This year, something unprecedented happened. All candidates were replaced by the new ones. So I think out of the candidates that we have, Ursula is one of those that is really a good choice. This is my personal opinion, and this is a good choice when it comes to questions on Ukraine as well. So as many meetings I would attend where I had opportunity to listen, to hear what she's talking about Ukraine, I can give a positive overlook on the situation in Ukraine as well. So we don't have a full composition of the entire commission yet, but the fact that Ursula managed to get elected and to get the trust vote in the European Parliament speaks a lot. So maybe I'll cut here. I'll give the floor to Hanna, and I hope that I gave a lot of good for thoughts and maybe more questions afterwards.
We can hear your opinion about elections in the EU, 2 elections in Ukraine and 3 elections in Lithuania. What are your expectations?
So first of all, the Russian aggression against Ukraine is in war. And unfortunately, within this more than 5 years of different diplomatic efforts from the West, including trilateral contact group in Minsk, Normandy format resulted in stopping the full-scale war in Ukraine, but not resulting in the ceasefire, which is really important because every day we are seeing either wounded people or killed soldiers, and this is a key and crucial question to us. And also different examples of Russian interference globally. It's not just about the European continent, it's about Venezuela, it's about Syria, and many others. So I think it's really important because with Mogherini vision, unfortunately, we never seen her in Eastern Ukraine. So, and this also reflects part of European Union policy, because if the key person responsible for foreign policy and security on behalf of the European Union never visited Eastern Ukraine, so it's strange. Also, I think besides clear approaches and I would like to say strategy from European Union towards Russian Federation, it will be hard to see what next, because first of all, I think for Ukraine it's really important to keep and to follow the principle nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And this recent unprecedented moment when Russia unconditionally was back to the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, it's just a sign, a very negative sign, and a way of discreditation of international well-respected institutions which were founded on the basis of human rights, democracy, respect of rule of law. So I think it's really important to see what will be next, because there are some probably expectations, not just in Russia. With Russians everything is clear. They for sure will try to use incompetency of the president, then lack of experience of newly elected MPs, and just to lobby for their interest within Ukraine, and also having the monopoly of Russian or Kremlin forces of TV channels in Ukraine and others. So I think it's really important to have this deep understanding in European Union that Russia is a threat not just for Ukraine, it's a threat for the whole West, because this is the war against Western civilization, which is really within these 5 years, unfortunately, we haven't seen a real strategy from the European Union or from West towards Russian Federation. Because if you ask me what is the strategy of the EU, everybody could answer sanctions. But sanctions, this is the instrument. This is not a strategy. Let's be honest. And by the way, the sanctions, it's another important issue, because in December, newly elected European Parliament will also have to make a decision on continue or not the sanctions against Russian Federation. And this situation with Russian return to Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe could be a bad signal regarding the future sanctions against Russian Federation. So I think also another issue we have to mention, this is the energy security for the whole European continent. And in this regard, I would like to mention Nord Stream 2 as an existential threat for Ukraine, and also a very negative project for European security. Here I would like to express my gratitude to our Baltic states countries, especially Lithuania, for all the initiatives, all their voice regarding Nord Stream 1, now helping us with in stopping Nord Stream 2, and also, of course, I have to mention my best friend Andrius Kubilius, with whom we started in 2017 from Warsaw Interparliamentary Assembly, Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, this so-called Marshall Plan for Ukraine, because I think this is really important initiative. And I hope, and this is my plan, what I'm now working, talking to different MPs from newly elected parties, or newly elected MPs from different parties, to organize the visit to Brussels.
Here in Ukraine, right?
Yes, here in Ukraine. I think it's really important with the new parliament to start preparing the visits of MPs from different political parties, but with the position of supporting EU and NATO membership perspective, visiting Brussels, Washington, and Berlin and some Baltic states. So I think it's really important for next parliament to pay these visits just to explain the priorities of their reform agenda, and also to be introduced to our key and strategic partners. So to build these bridges, and this is also I think where Kubilius and other partners from Poland and others could really help us, because we have to extend this group of friends or friendship group within the European Parliament, which now includes good friends of Ukraine, who knows Ukraine in detail, who participated in Dignity Revolution, who travel a lot throughout Ukraine, in Eastern Ukraine, Western, like Kubilius, by the way. Last year they managed to, they conducted a bicycle tour, and they traveled within 1 week more than 500 kilometers every day from one city to another in Eastern Ukraine.
And it was not for the first time.
Yeah, it was not for the first time, but so it's another way of promoting decentralization reform, which is really important. So I think we have to consider common challenges, and also to prepare a strategy how to respond on these challenges. And of course, one of the key source of threats is Russian Federation for all of us, and all these attempts of appeasement policy or trying to have a dialogue with Russia and in the energy sector. And we've already seen the visit of Mr. Medvedchuk. I mention Medvedchuk not just because he is suing me, but also because he is the future either vice speaker of parliament, or he potentially could be working in constitutional court or others. So I think because they are representing the interest of Kremlin, and all their PR provide Ukrainians with cheaper gas from Russian Federation and others. I'm the only channel direct contact to Putin, and I'm ready to release sailors and others. So this is just the washing approach of his reputation, and also to show not coalition agreement, how to say, the agreement, not agreement, the priorities of servant of the people, because for sure it's now clear that they will not invite another parties to join to the coalition so far. And also the government building or forming the new government, and either they will follow the approach of inviting like experts, technocratic government, or this will be just political approach, and we will see. And also I think here it's really important role of international organizations. Mr. Zelensky, by the way, I think it would be a good idea, and I'm promoting this idea. In June I visited the Baltic Assembly in Lithuania, and as we discussed that Zelensky could pay a visit to Lithuania during Adamkus conference in August, in August, and to, for example, to sign an agreement on joining Ukraine to the center, NATO Center of Excellences on energy security, and also to make our bilateral relations like more strengthened, and also more on a private level. Plus, as we know, Zelensky is planning to visit Warsaw at the beginning. At the beginning of September, to participate in the events dedicated to the 80th anniversary of the beginning of the World War II, where Mr. Trump is going also to participate. So I think this is a good events. First, to deliver key signals on behalf of Ukraine as a president, and also during these discussions to hear from our Western partners also their, not conditionalities, but like their expectations to see the reform of state security service, implementation of national security law, de-oligarchization, and all these promises which he made during his campaign. So I think it's a new period, because on the one hand, when all our Western partners applauded and saying, "Oh, Ukraine is a mature democracy. Look at the presidential election. Ukraine managed to conduct free and fair elections. We have to learn from Ukraine how to conduct such good elections now with parliamentary." So this is really good to hear these compliments. But okay, we have to take responsibility for this democracy, for the choice of people, when we received a lot of unprofessional, unexperienced MPs in country which facing a real Russian aggression, with military component, with hybrid disinformation campaign, with like everything. So, and still, when we need more investment to our economy, because people are very unsatisfied with reform agenda, and they would like to live in very prosperous country, and also not to take responsibility for next reforms.
Which doesn't happen like that?
Yes.
Moreover, since the president, well, this is the only president of Ukraine, the first president of Ukraine who has like really great opportunities to reform the country. Like there is not a single president of Ukraine had such strong support as the current president. Full control of the parliament, one-party majority. So now it's time to fulfill his promises, if he feels sincere about them. I just have one follow-up question about the new president of Lithuania. So who is Mr. Nausėda? I know his predecessor has set the bar really high. We can definitely say that he is definitely not a Russian politician, but still, will he be able to be as strong supporters of Ukraine as Dalia Grybauskaitė?
Well, I can tell you that this is a very difficult question, because as you said to yourself, Dalia Grybauskaitė really set a high line for this. She was an iron lady when it comes to the issues, not only for Lithuanian but for Ukrainian as well, and we are very thankful for her for 10 years of this work. Our new president, it's still 100 days didn't pass, but I can tell you one. The foreign affairs advisor that we selected, Mr. Laushkene, I think it's a good choice. It's an experienced diplomat, and this is someone that I would trust to work on these issues. There were a couple of other surnames that were mentioned among those that were not bad as well, and we can see that he's trying to make his team as professional as it can be. Nevertheless, there were some worrying messages during his campaign as well that also spoke about renewing a dialogue, or having a softer talk when it comes to the issues of the Russian Federation. We do not know yet what does that mean. I think we'll have a chance to witness very soon. Nevertheless, our people gave a trust for him. We had two very strong candidates for the second round, and he won. So one of the predictions for that could be that people really want, after seeing for 10 years a strong woman, maybe they just wanted to see a tall, handsome man. Yes, sometimes we joke inside the corridors that finally Lithuania has a handsome man as a president of the country. Jokes aside, I do not know if he will be as good as Dalia Grybauskaitė. It will be very hard. That's first. Secondly, he does not have a political experience, which, in my point of view, should be there. At least some of that. At least some of the international meetings, because let's not forget, in Lithuania, president is firstly responsible for the diplomatic service and for the foreign affairs of the country. So this is something which is of the utmost important. So I'll give him a chance. Lithuanian people already gave him a chance. So after 2 months we can discuss more when we have something to witness. So that's my short remark on the currently elected president.
I think electing presidents with no political experience is a kind of tendency.
It's the unknown, you know, and the unknown can be good, can be bad. So how it will turn, we will soon witness. I think same in Ukraine.
That's good. Okay, I think I'll open the floor for discussion. If you have any questions, please introduce yourself and ask a question. Anyone?
I have a question. I'm glad to see you both because for me you're a very interesting person. I know Gintare during a lot of years, and wow, dear MPs with which I have made a good result in some very important question for Ukraine. She knows about which I said. My question about Gintare, about results in European Parliament and like policy towards migrants. We know a lot about all the discussion in the European Union, like some extreme position, like to take migrants in a European country. How do you think can this like pro-migrant policy change in future?
Would you like to specify a little bit? Do you speak about the immigration policies as in general, or immigrants from Ukraine?
No, I mean in general to European Union, from Africa, Asia. So.
Well, I think that currently the European Union's policies when it comes to refugees, let's separate them, split to refugees, is to help them in their neighboring countries, of which international law speaks as well. So say if we have refugees from Syria, they have neighboring country, Turkey or Jordan, Lebanon, so we would better invest in spending money in helping those countries to allocate those refugees so that they stay there, because that's what international law is talking about. So that's about refugees, and same would go for the African countries. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated when we have a sea border, say in the case of Greece. So what do you do when you have people with the boats coming to your seashores? Of course, you accept them in, and since then you need to take care of their well-being, and then to decide what to do next. And it's a sea border again, based on the international law. When it comes to migration policies, I think inside European we have very split opinions, which is okay. We're still 28 member countries with different political parties and political opinions in each of the 28 countries. So finding a common decision or like one view on different questions, it's always a long procedure, and it's still continuing. So say, let's take an example of the central, or like Visegrad, maybe let's focus on Visegrad countries. Open immigration policies for them is not something that they would like to see, at least majority, or the government, or the governments of those countries. Sometimes you would witness very different positions if you just simply talk to the civil society in those countries. All the three Baltic states are ready to accept all of the immigrants that were set by the quotas set by the European Union. So in here we are taking a little moderate position. We are not as tough on this question, or we are not as against of taking in immigrants as the Visegrad 4 countries, but at the same time we are not that open as, say, Sweden is. At the same time, if we take scenario of Sweden, you know, it was one of the first countries that actually started these immigration policies. They even had a minister on migration, and asylum, Minister Tobias Billström, back in the day. But now, when we start facing some issues, I think these policies might change. So I think it's up also on the new European Parliament composition what we will do in the future. And I think the new waves are upcoming, and I think it's very important for us to invest in the countries outside of the borders of the European Union if we would like to avoid such situations. So, of course, we are ready to take in, those people that come and work and contribute to our economies, that integrate, that come
Like
to
Ukrainians in Poland.
in Lithuania too. My father hires groups of Ukrainians. So this is something which is fine. But if we are talking about such a people, that just come, takes visas and escapes, no one knows where, and these things are happening, then this is not good. But when we speak about Ukrainian immigrants in Lithuania and Poland, I think most of them are really coming just for economical reasons, and they also contribute to our economy as well, and as they bring back money to our own country. So I totally support that. I think this is something good. This is something that we should continue.
Yeah, because if I might add here, when we were promoting this new European investment plan for Ukraine with Andrius Kubilius, and we were analyzing the EU external investment fund. Yes, Ostap, because by the way, there is another MP, Ostap Jednak. Let me introduce him, because with Ostap and also Kubilius, and we traveled to almost key strategic capitals like Washington with Ostap. Then Ostap separately traveled with Kubilius to London, Brussels, Berlin, Paris, Lithuania with promotion. And then when we found out that in the EU external investment fund there is 40 billion of euros for and even written Marshall Plan for Africa. So this is exactly to help African countries, and also to help the EU to stop this refugees flow, because it's really very hard for different European Union member states to manage the situation after. And of course, compare to Ukrainians, as you mentioned, especially in Poland and Lithuania. So of course they are adding to GDP growth of Poland and other countries. And for us it's a big problem, because we also have now a crisis of working
Labor force.
Labor force, and this is one of the, I think, now challenge for Mr. Zelensky, who is already announced how he will work with diaspora people, but also how he will encourage Ukrainians to come back to Ukraine, and he will fight with corruption and also create an opportunity for Ukrainians who are living abroad to be back. And also, unfortunately, if we analyze the direct foreign investment to Ukraine, loans we received from IMF and others, so it's uncomparable to what we received from Ukrainians living abroad through financial remittances. For last year, Ukraine received around 11 billions of US dollars. Can you imagine? Per 1 year, 11 billions of US dollars from Ukrainians living abroad, and it's more than we received within 3 years or even 4 years from IMF, G7 countries, the European Union and others all together.
What does it tell you?
Oh.
So what does it tell you?
I would like to elaborate on this question. Lithuania had many Lithuanians who left Lithuania after after basically Lithuania joined the EU, even before that. Have there been in place any return policies to make Lithuanians to convince to return to Lithuania? And what are they?
Well, first of all, let's not forget, once you enter the European Union and the Schengen zone, you get to benefit from the free movement and your own right to choose the place of study, the place of work. So I do not call it the very exact emigration, not in all of the case scenarios. Sometimes it's just the internal migration within the borders of Schengen zone. Secondly, part of these people started coming back, which is already good. And another thing is that I think that until now, economical situation in Lithuania changed really much since we joined, and we are so happy for that. And I think now the salaries in Lithuania and the opportunities in Lithuania equals the opportunities in any of the other European Union member country. It's a little bit different when it comes to Norway, because we have still a lot of people living in Norway, but I can tell you, actually, one of the biggest groups of my voters in European Parliament elections were Lithuanians living abroad, right? So I know quite some of them. So I can tell you that you will rarely meet someone, of course there are such, that are not planning to return to Lithuania. They left for, a few years to earn, maybe they got some better job, maybe
receive experience.
We receive experience, do things like that. Of course there were some that left for full, really bad economical situation, but at that time they did not have the opportunity to earn as much as they have it now. So I think the situation has really increased, and how we manage to do so is basically through the reforms. And this is something that Ukrainian, I think, society, not only politicians, I think they fully understand that. Society needs to understand that reforms do not happen over the night, and even if you do the reform over the night, you will not feel the benefit of it over the next day. Sometimes it takes a decade, sometimes it takes 2 years, sometimes it takes 5 years. And people in general, not only in Ukraine, they are, they like to see everything happening in a positive way the next day. It doesn't happen over the night. So this is something we need to understand, and if we are going through the ways of the reforms, we have to go it until the end, because if we do not do so, changes simply will not come by themselves. So this is something that Ukrainian society should be patient on as well.
So it's too late.
And this is, by the way, one of the problems we might face, because the expectations from people who voted for Zelensky and now for his political party, the people, are very high. Yeah. They are dreaming to see the changes overnight. And it will be very hard to explain that country which spent more than 5% of GDP on security and defense, which has like 50% of the populations under different subsidies. And and there is a risk that to deliver something, Zelensky might make some more populistic, very cosmetic changes instead of real reforms. Or we started the decentralization reform. For example, in Sweden, this reform took like 30 years. In Ukraine, now within this 5 years, we've seen the establishment of 913 amalgamated communities. So it's only 30% of the whole territory of Ukraine. So the reform started, but not completed, not finished, and it's really important for newly elected parliament to continue focusing on completing this reform. Not to start it from scratch, but to continue. The same like healthcare reform. It's one of the most painful, the most hardest reform in Ukraine, because
probably in any country.
Huh? In any country, yes.
Yes.
But in our case, it's written in the constitution that everybody in the country
is entitled to free healthcare.
Yes, is entitled to free healthcare. But if you ask like where to take money for like this
Primary level.
Yeah, first level of then second, then surgeries level, another. So it's all plus people usually they heavy smokers, drinker. They are not thinking about like healthy lifestyles and others. And I think it's really important that newly elected parliament, vice president, and the future government, they will first continue all good reforms we started with the support of international partners. And because the results could be produced only in next like 3-5 years, and it's really important to explain people that such deep reforms like healthcare reform, it's not about 5 years, it's not even about the life of one convocation or one presidential term. It's much, it goes much beyond this. And also it's really important to keep focusing on our national interests, like defense and security reform, healthcare, education reform, decentralization. It's about national interests, and they are obliged to continue these reforms, but not in the sake of the populism or earning very quick wins, to say that, oh, we are starting like new reforms from like scratch and others.
Thank you. This point, anyone questions?
Yes, I have a question. My name is Gintare Narkeviciute. I'm the special correspondent from the Ukrainian Parliament Club. I have a questions for you as a member of the European Parliament. What is
Member? Candidate.
candidate? Okay,
Yes.
still candidate.
Next year should be
Future
the member
Yes.
of Lithuania.
What is your view? What is view of the European Union on Moldova as a country and the Pridnestrovia and all the Pridnestrovia crisis in Moldova? Does it can be a part of the European Union? Does you have a support? Does you have any view on this country at all as a
Well, I can tell you, thank you very much for this question, but actually I wanted to also put a little bit of light on Georgia as well, not only Moldova, because when we had European elections, when we had elections in Ukraine, you know, and a lot of elections over the European Union countries, what was actually happening in these two countries, Moldova and Georgia particularly, many people closed eyes. Okay, Moldova, we reached a good result, my assembly, thanks God. But let's hope we will stick, that Moldovan people will stick to that, and she will do a good job. I know her personally, and I know her motivation and you know how much capable she is to bring in the positive change in the country. So let's give her a chance. On Transnistria, I'll return. Now I want to put a light on Georgia, because you know the very last thing that happened, you know, after all the interventions of the Russian MPs, you know, entering the Georgian parliament and things like that, is taking over Rustavi 2 television, which was one of the last, or if not the last, independent media in Georgia. So maybe Hanna remembers 2 or 3 years ago we fighted a lot, you know, in international efforts so that Rustavi 2 would not be taking over to the pro-oligarch government. Now, unfortunately, we lost this battle, and a week ago this happened, or 2 weeks even ago this happened. So if we return to strategy on Russia, I think this unfortunate result can be used as an argument to see what Russia is doing when the West is sleeping. Because sometimes countries inside, or like democratic forces inside those countries, are not strong enough, or they lack of ally support to actually fight for democratic for what's democratic inside their countries. So Georgia is very drifting away from democratic path, and I think this is also a result of us shutting a little bit our eyes in the light of our own elections. And let's not forget that the Russian bear never sleeps. And when we come back to Transnistria, well, I think it's a defrozen zone. The former government of Moldova had, maybe they still have, I'm not sure actually, I should double check. They even have the minister maybe on integration of Transnistria, something like that. And I had an opportunity to hear one of them speaking in one of the international meetings with the international delegations. Frankly speaking, I do not see much of the light in there. Let's be very open, it's just Russian bases over there. I do not have any optimism to reintegrate Transnistria into Moldova at this stage. Nevertheless, I would be quite optimistic for Moldova and also for Ukraine entering the EU, say until in another 8 years. 2027, something like that.
2027, this is very important year. When
There's a reason
Lithuania,
why
there will be presidency of Lithuania at the European Union. So, and this is also one of the plan of Mr. Kubilius to prepare the roadmap. And to use 2020 the German presidency in the EU, then a Polish presidency and Lithuania, and just to become...
It wasn't secret plan.
No, it's already published.
No, it's not a secret.
It's not a secret.
And do I have an opportunity for the second question? And the second question will be not about like Earth's geopolitics, but about space. Does the Ukraine about space? Does the European Union have? Do you have any information about European Union space policy? About their plan about space technologies, space innovations? Or...
By airspace.
Yes.
Okay. I must admit,
You're not on that level.
I'm really. I never had an opportunity to have a look into that because my focus were always external borders, policies, and
Well, it's pretty external.
Not that far. Not that far.
Terrestrial.
East and Middle East, basically.
Okay.
Maybe I know you met recently new leader of Moldova as well. So
Yes.
if you have any thoughts on this.
So actually, my son visited Kyiv just 2 weeks or something ago. Yes, I think it's really very important to the chief had the meeting with Mr. Zelensky, with Prime Minister Groisman, with some NGOs, and also during my conversation with her discussion. So we focused on the issue of how to restore territorial integrity and sovereignty of Moldova, because within these 5 years in Ukrainian Parliament, we established Interparliamentary Assembly Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova for the first time in our parliamentary history. And it's really important because the idea was to bring 3 of us together, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, with the aim to focus on sanctions against Russia, counter-Russian hybrid propaganda, also focusing on de-occupation, and also building our better cooperation during our conversation with Brussels, with Washington. And here, by the way, Lithuania was really very helpful. This was one also of the idea of Žegimindas Paviljonis, to organize a visit, joint visit, Ukrainian MPs, Georgian and Moldova to Washington with the support of Lithuanian Polish MPs. Because Poland and Lithuania, as members of the EU and NATO, they could be like supporters of our future Euro-Atlantic integrations, helping us to be more productive in achieving these results. So this is, I think, still, and I hope the new parliament will also continue this practice, and based on established Interparliamentary Assembly, will also build these communications. I want to talk to my son because before the Vice Prime Minister of Russian Federation, Mr. Kozak, he visited Moldova, and they discussed the situation with Transnistria and cooperation with Russian Federation. So I think it's really important for us to coordinate efforts and not to allow Russians this Kozak plan, like federalization of Moldova, because one day this plan could work for Ukraine with Donbass. This is the idea of Mr. Medvedchuk and pro-Russian forces. So I think also, and there are some Western partners which will be ready just to say, okay, finally there is no, there's like all these problems of occupation of Moldova, Transnistria conflict and others. Let's all finally settle the problem. So I think it's really important to have this coordination, and on the parliamentary level as well, with the support of Lithuanian friends and friends from Lithuania who are now in European Parliament, who have this clear vision where are the red lines, which are unacceptable both for Moldova, for Ukraine, and this is really important.
If I may add, I can tell you that this is a lesson that we really learned when we were trying to enter European Union and NATO, and I think that this is of crucial importance that you have friends outside of the borders and you join the efforts, you know, in Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, so you know, we were three in the way also to try to reach our goals. But I remember when in the beginning, you know, our politicians were trying to reach this goal pro-Atlantic and Euro-Atlantic and European integration, we were just traveling around and telling all the Westerners, you know, how many problems we have. Until, you know, we realized that we have to bring up the solutions, we have to say what we will deliver, what we will do in our countries, and in this way we'll manage to reach this goal. And what's the most important, we'll have to have a common vision inside our society and of the state as a state matter, not as some politicians, that this is our goal, this is our vector that we are keeping, and we will keep it steady for the years to come. And this is what we want. We want to be members of the European Union, we want to be members of NATO. Go for it, find allies, and allies will stand for you as long as you will manage to stand for yourselves.
That's right. I know Hanna has first to run. Do you have time for my own question?
One question, yes, of course,
There's
because we...
I want to ask one more question. I want Hanna ask you about Romania. How do you estimate our relation with Romania? For me, I like opened this country like maybe 2 months ago as something very important for Ukraine. If to compare with Lithuania, Lithuania is like a brother country during a lot of centuries, and Romania is a big neighbor of Ukraine, and like in generally, I think people which involved in politics like can say a lot about this country, but on the other hand, it's very important country. What's your experience with Romania and all this question about war with Russia and Romania? How Romania like think about all this question?
This year started from Romanian presidency in European Union. So, and here Romanian ambassador was very active in organizing different debates, discussions, and then at the European Union level, we were discussing about the Black Sea security initiatives, because the Black Sea, it's something in common for and all the threats from militarization of Crimea, the open act of aggression in Azov Sea from Russian Federation and others. So I think this is where Ukraine paid attention using Romanian support to European Union and other partners. So I think Romanians understand the threats from Russian Federation and for the whole security, especially having this S-400, S-400 systems, which are placed in, deployed at temporarily occupied Crimea. Second, it's really important that Romania also responsible for cybersecurity, and they are responsible for NATO trust funds, which Ukraine could develop, and we have several projects with Romania in this improving the standards using bilateral support. I think we have a good example like Ukrainian, Polish and Lithuanian Ukrpol-lit brigades, and there was also an idea to invite also Romania and to extend the partnership with Romania. And also I would like to express my gratitude to Romania, because Romania didn't join to Hungary, the same like Poland, Slovak Republic and others, when Hungary started to use Ukrainian domestic legislation like law on education, state language law and others against Ukraine at different international organizations like NATO, even the European Unions, when they didn't support the 1 billion of macro-financial assistance from European Union and others. So, and there was at the beginning the idea from Hungary to build a coalition against Ukraine, and just to show Ukraine is backsliding the minority rights and all these issues. And really, Romania is not a part of these games against Ukraine, and really very helpful. And I'm agree with you that we have to work closer and also to develop tourism projects, and also Romania supported Ukraine in rehabilitation of our soldiers, also organizing different summer camps for children of the veterans from Russian war against Ukraine and others. So we have to strengthen this partnership, and also there is different infrastructure projects where we have common interest. And Ukraine adopted a law on trans-border cooperation and partnership, which open a new opportunity for regional level, like cities, local villages, which are living on the borders from Romania, Poland and others. Now, having this instrument, Ukraine, together with Romanian local communities, they could apply for EU funds, financial resources for common projects. So, I will leave that today.
Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for the speech. You still have time, right?
Very little actually.
So maybe like
7:30 I have to be in
just
another.
to elaborate, like what's your opinion about elaborating this Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland friendship triangle to Romania and maybe some other countries like Gintare?
Well, I think that Croatia's President Kolinda had a very good idea, and it's still actually ongoing, those meetings, but we should, it's a Baltic Black Sea initiative, it's called. It's happening at the 3 different levels, from the highest to the lower levels, politically and diplomatically. So I think what we could do is simply to include Ukraine in it, because this is the only country which is missing. But the thing is that they focus on the members of the European Union, and that's why Ukraine was not there. But those ideas were brought by me and some other colleagues at those meetings. So I think if Ukraine also joins some efforts, that could be a good thing. And also Mr. Andriy Parubi is having very great ideas when it comes to Baltic Black Sea cooperation. So I think it's a green light, and we should have more of these initiatives and use it in many different ways, in transportation, infrastructure connections and things like that. So
Okay, thank you for your
Thank you
thank
so
you
much. Wish you all the best next
all the
year.
best for you.